Max, you just got back from Germany, where you went with Israeli journalist David Sheen. Why were you invited there, and why was your very first scheduled talk canceled only 15 hours before the event?
It was interesting arriving in Germany with the Jewish-Israeli journalist David Sheen and realizing that as a Jewish American, it was perfectly acceptable for the children and grandchildren of Nazis to call me an anti-Semite in Germany, because I've defined my Jewish identity outside the frontiers of Israeli nationalism. In Germany, anti-Semitism is defined as apparently anyone who is a critic of the Israeli government. And we quickly were targeted by an Israel lobby operation that deployed elements of the German left against us to shut down our talk at the main public theater in Berlin, the Volksbühne, and to attempt to shut down our planned event at the German parliament, where I was going to discuss the testimony I gathered and the evidence I gathered in the Gaza Strip during Operation Protective Edge of Israeli atrocities. And David Sheen was going to present his documentation of state-sponsored Israeli racism and mob violence during the war this summer. So that was really the conversation that these German politicians and Israel lobbyists were seeking to shut down under the cover of anti-Semitism, actually accusing us of abusing the memory of the Holocaust. So it was incredible to watch this unfold.
One of your main assailants there was a guy named Benjamin Weinthal, an American living in Berlin who works for the Neocon Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. It's a DC think tank funded by Sheldon Adelson. Max, talk about what this network's role is and why it was so instrumental in shutting you down.
Well, nobody in Germany, except for my hosts, knew who I was. And so the German left was relying on Benjamin Weinthal as kind of their translator. You know, the Green Party's Volker Beck of the Green Party, who's this German Gentile politician who denounced me as an anti-Semite, was relying on, distortions and fabrications about me supplied to him by Weinthal. And, it's not easy being green, as Kermit the Frog said, especially when you're a puppet for a right-wing Muppet like Weinthal. And that's what the German left became. Weinthal is a journalistic reject who found his calling as an Israel lobby operative in Berlin, funded by right-wing billionaires like Sheldon Adelson, who has said that he doesn't like journalism and has advocated the dropping of a nuclear bomb on Iran. Through the Foundation of the Defense of Democracies, Weinthal's been planted in Berlin to basically orchestrate these kind of campaigns. And he called up Gregory Gysi, who was the faction chairman of the Die Linke Party, whose members had actually invited and hosted me and David Sheen, and told Gysi that we were going to compare Israel to Nazi Germany, which wasn't part of our presentation at all. Gysi immediately announced that he would shut down our event, and Weinthal proceeded to go to a series of other politicians who were connected to the Israel lobby, gathering these statements about our supposed anti-Semitism, published it in the right-wing Berliner Morgenpost, published it in the Jerusalem Post, and the scandal was manufactured, putting our hosts on the defensive. And, our hosts, Inga Hoger and Annette Groth from the Die Linke Party's beleaguered anti-imperialist wing, which the Israel lobby is aiming to destroy, did very little to defend us.
You actually got a chance to confront Gregor Gysi in the German parliament. He actually locked himself in the bathroom, Max. He must have been pretty scared of you.
Well, after our event at the parliament, at the German parliament, which actually took place, David Sheen and I were able to present our testimony and evidence on what happened during the war in Gaza, something that the Israel lobby in Germany was seeking to prevent. We wanted to meet with Gregor Gysi, who is really the leader of the reformist wing of the Die Linke Party, the main left-wing opposition party in Germany, and has worked to reposition that party to support Germany's special relationship with Israel and to drive out the anti-imperialist elements that are in solidarity with Palestine in that party. And so to the last second, he was trying to shut down our event And we had to switch rooms twice because of Gysi. And all I wanted to do was have a civil private meeting with Gysi. He absolutely refused to talk to us after endorsing the entire campaign of incitement and slurs against us. And so when he burst out of his office and rushed by us, we confronted him, and I called him a coward, which he is. He rushed through a door, which turned out to be a bathroom, and slammed the door on David Sheen, screaming, "Aus! Aus!" And the scandal now known in Germany as Toilettengate was born.
Let's talk about another political movement in Germany, the anti-Deutsch movement. I mean, at face value, you would think that this would be kind of in line with the pro-Palestinian cause. It's a far-left party that rejects far-right politics, yet unequivocally supports the state of Israel, has aligned itself with the most far-right elements of the Jewish diaspora. How much influence does this group have in German politics, and what role did it play in smears against you?
Well, if the anti-Deutsch or anti-German movement sounds weird, if it sounds like something out of The Big Lebowski, it's because it is weird. I mean, Germany is just a really weird, parochial, in some ways intellectually backwards place. The anti-Deutsch movement has gained enormous influence through a group called Bach Shalom, which operates within the Die Linke party and aims to crush people like our hosts from the party's anti-imperialist wing. It's actually a group that emerged from the Marxist, post-structuralist, left-wing intellectual circles in Berlin and aims to actually crush the left. In a lot of ways, it's like the neoconservative movement in the US, which also emerged from communist circles. It only has a few hundred members, maybe a few thousand members, but it bears a disproportionate influence on German politics by taking over the youth faction of Die Linke, Bach Shalom, the youth faction of the Socialist Democratic Party, and installing its members in the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, which is one of the most influential left-wing foundations in Berlin. And they really managed to amplify the smears against us, working through friendly politicians in the Die Linke party. And what the anti-Deutsch movement represents is a fear. It emerged from a fear of a fascistization or a second Holocaust after reunification between the East and West Germany after the Cold War. Its members believe that the only way to fight anti-Semitism is to express unequivocal support for the state of Israel and any measures it takes against the Palestinians. They are also unequivocally pro-American, and because the United States is Israel's largest beneficiary and largest patron, and they have even celebrated the British firebombing of Dresden. So they're completely reactionary. They believe that attacks or criticism of global capitalism are actually attacks on Jews, suggesting in an anti-Semitic fashion that Jews control global capital. And so this group works within the anti-fascist left in Berlin at advancing reactionary right-wing positions and giving the pro-Israel lobby a base within the German left. And so it was through the anti-Deutsch elements like Bach Shalom that the attacks on us grew within the Die Linke party. And it's through this very small but very powerful element that the anti-imperialist elements within the main left-wing opposition party in Germany are being driven out. This group is the anchor for the right-wing pro-Israel lobby in the US within the German left. And it's very complex and weird, but it needs to be understood. And
Germany surely feels, on the flip side, that it has a personal stake in protecting and defending the state of Israel because Germany sponsored the Holocaust. So what's your response to Germans' line of thinking that they have no moral authority to question what Israel does?
Well, in the 50s, Germany decided to pay reparations to Israel, the state of Israel, in order to obtain absolution for the crimes it committed against Jews, including many Jews who had nothing to do with Zionism and who did not immigrate to Israel. These Holocaust reparations funded the military regime that Israel imposed on the Palestinians between 1948 and 1966. Now Germany provides Israel with discounted Dolphin-class submarines with launching tubes specially retrofitted to launch nuclear weapons. It recently inked a deal with Israel to provide it with a 30% discount on corvette boats, which will be used to attack fishermen in the Gaza Strip, and to protect Israel's illegally obtained gas fields off of the coast of Gaza. The German government, for the first time, is initiating direct training between its troops and Israeli forces in counterinsurgency. And this is all done under the fog of Holocaust guilt and in the name of Holocaust reparations. I really don't see how this honors the memory of the millions turned to ash. If anything, it seems to be abusing their memory and perpetuating the racist spirit the racist spirit of the Holocaust against a ghettoized and racially outcasted population to perpetuate their occupation. That is something that I wanted to address in Germany, and just by simply embracing the universalist lessons of the Holocaust, Sheen and I, for simply declaring never again to anyone instead of never again only to Jews, were demonized as anti-Semites in Germany and boycotted as Jews.
And there has been a real rise of violent events in Europe perpetrated in the name of anti-Semitism. I mean, there was the Paris suburb being firebombed, a German synagogue being destroyed in recent months. How should European countries be responding to these types of events?
Well, we see there is a resurgence of anti-Semitism on some level, but there's also an exaggeration of anti-Semitism. There is also, and at the same time, Islamophobia, which is the flip side of anti-Semitism and embodies the same spirit, is downplayed. Most hate crimes in Germany are committed against Muslims, but we rarely hear about them. We rarely hear about the German government deporting thousands of Roma to Kosovo and other supposedly safe countries, which aren't even safe. But the way that Germany should respond is by adopting a holistic definition that operates under the frame of racism instead of anti-Semitism alone. A recent study, a study taken last week in Germany, showed that German citizens who are the most supportive of Palestinian rights have the least anti-Semitic opinions. And so this is another reason why anti-Semitism has to be redefined into a kind of new anti-Semitism, which takes the form of criticism of the Israeli government. What the German government and the German mainstream refuses to look at is its own racism, particularly against immigrants who may have German citizenship but don't have the same rights in the street. A perfect example of this is the Kilani family, a German family with German citizenship that was wiped out, one of the 89 families completely exterminated in the Gaza Strip during Israel's war this summer. And the German government did not issue any condolence for this family to Ibrahim Kilani, a German citizen. However, when 2 German citizens were killed on a airliner in eastern Ukraine that was probably shot down by Russian separatists, the German government rushed to issue condolences. So we can see the clear difference in how it treats its white citizens and Muslim immigrant citizens.
Max, let's talk about how the notion of anti-Semitism is getting redefined here in the U.S. A resolution was unanimously passed by the House in September of this year that praises Germany for its condemnation of anti-Semitism and calls on Secretary of State John Kerry to confront what it calls a dangerous trend. Do you think these laws could prevent criticism of Israel?
If you look at the language in this resolution, it is aimed at critics of Israel, and it conflates criticism of Israel with racism against Jews, which I consider to be anti-Semitic because Israel does not represent all the world's Jews. And it's anti-Semites who wish that it did so they could implicate all Jews in Israel's crimes against the Palestinians. So this is a really dangerous precedent. Again, it shows how anti-Semitism is actually being repackaged because in the United States, anti-Semitism almost doesn't exist. Even Alan Dershowitz has said that. And I'm a perfect example of Jewish privilege in the United States and how well Jews are treated and how far we've come. We're one of the most elite groups. And in a lot of senses, the Jewish establishment is wielding anti-Semitism to prevent criticism of our privilege and the way that we exercise it in order to support the occupation of Palestinians. This is, as I said, it's an incredibly dangerous trend. And if the United States was serious about confronting anti-Semitic groups, it would apply equal standards against, for example, neo-Nazis operating in eastern Ukraine, including neo-Nazi violent militias who wear swastikas and uphold flags that look very much like swastikas. But we recently saw the United States vote against a resolution at the UN General Assembly condemning Nazism, apparently for fear that this would limit its ability to support a Ukrainian government that is honeycombed with neo-Nazis.
I'm so happy you brought this up, because you just wrote a piece for Alternet where you point out that an amendment to the 2015 NDAA that could have prohibited U.S. training and assistance to neo-Nazis and other extremists in Ukraine, it was not supported by the country's biggest Jewish lobbying groups. Why would they not support that?
Well, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which named me the #9 anti-Israel, anti-Semite of 2013, tied with the African-American author Alice Walker and 8 slots behind Ayatollah Khomeini. The Simon Wiesenthal Center, yeah. Well, I'm trying to be #1 next year. I'm really ambitious. But along with the Anti-Defamation League, the shakedown racket of Abe Foxman, which would be better, should be known as the Defamation League. These two groups were approached by Democratic congressional staffers to support an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Bill, which funds the Pentagon. And it had been sponsored by Representative John Conyers, this amendment. And it called for cutting off all aid to neo-Nazi groups and anyone who had voiced support for violent radical right-wing extremism in Ukraine. Conyers saw this as a way of tamping down on tensions in eastern Ukraine. And it seems to make sense. I mean, why would we want to fund neo-Nazis? The Wiesenthal Center and the ADL explicitly rejected this amendment. They said they would not support it because they need to support the Ukrainian campaign against Russia. And that Svoboda and groups that are led by literal neo-Nazis, like Right Sector, have moderated their rhetoric because the Right Sector's leadership and Svoboda's leadership, Tianbok, recently met with the Israeli ambassador in Ukraine. So these pro-Israel Jewish establishment groups in Washington basically refused to support a bill that would cut off aid to neo-Nazis. It was stripped out of the amendment with no support, died a quiet death. And the Azov militia, which is a neo-Nazi militia which is fighting on the Eastern Front in Ukraine, whose members have swastikas on their arms, and whose leadership has now won seats in the Ukrainian parliament, in the party of Yatsenyuk and Poroshenko, are now, their financial feeding tube is still intact.
Very scary situation there, Max. I can't let you go without your thoughts on the Israeli cabinet approving a bill that would officially define the country as reserving, quote, national rights for Jews only.
Well, this brings into clear view the system that Israel's operated under since 1948, which is ethnocracy. This bill is merely declaratory, but it will strip away the veneer that has existed around Israel's system of apartheid for so long. And there are so many discriminatory laws that have passed since 1948, from the Anti-Infiltration Act, which defined Palestinians who once lived inside Israel as infiltrators instead of refugees, and basically prevents them from living in Israel, to the Center of Life law, which prevents any Palestinian living in Jerusalem who spends any period of time in the West Bank from retaining their residency in Jerusalem, and is really driving a lot of the violence in Jerusalem right now, to the Acceptance to Communities law, which was recently passed and allows communities of under 500 to discriminate on the basis of race and religion. This is official. There are so many laws discriminating against people on the basis of ethnicity and religion in Israel. And this new law will merely bring this system into clear view. And so in a way, I kind of support it, because at least Israel is being honest about its character as the Jewish state in Israel and the Levant, or JSIL. And you can see that it's causing a conniption fit among liberal Zionists who have always tried to maintain the fantasy that there is a democratic Israel that exists alongside the undemocratic Israel that controls the occupied territories. This fantasy has been exploded not by me or by any anti-Zionist, but by the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And so let's be honest about what Israel is.
Indeed. Well said. I'm just looking forward to seeing how people can actually defend this now that it is laid bare. Max Blumenthal, investigative journalist, author, Goliath, Life and Loathing in Greater Israel. Always amazing to have you on. Incredible story.
Thanks a lot.